Should I learn Norwegian or Swedish or maybe Danish? Well, as you might know, there's just one Scandinavian language, just that the people in Sweden don't know how to write it and the people in Denmark don't know how to speak it. And you might have heard this joke from me before because I really like it. It's a Norwegian joke, obviously, but it actually does describe the situation of the three Scandinavian languages, Danish, Norwegian, and Swedish, quite accurately. They are so similar that we could talk about dialects of the same language. So does it not matter at all? Could you just learn any of those three and it would be fine? Well, it's of course not that easy. There are differences, but generally I would just say, if you cannot really decide, well, ask yourself, what is the country that you have most connection with? Do you want to study in Sweden, or are you interested in Norwegian culture, or do you often go on holidays to Denmark? Then of course it makes sense to work with the language that you have the most connection to and not bother so much about which one is the easiest or which one is the most accessible. It is also possible to change from one of those languages to another one at a later point. So for example, if you start learning Swedish and after a few months you get an amazing job offer in Norway, you can switch to learning Norwegian. You don't have to start from scratch because most of what you have learned you already know. You just have to twist it a little bit so that it fits the Norwegian writing, and there are a few small grammar differences and the vocabulary is slightly different, but you really don't have to start from scratch. And it is even possible to have a conversation with someone from another Scandinavian country. So I have friends in Sweden, but I don't speak Swedish, I speak Norwegian to them, and this kind of conversation is called svorsk, where one person speaks Norwegian, the other one speaks Swedish, and that works perfectly well. Once in a while we have to clarify the meaning of a word, but basically it's not a big deal. We can understand each other without any problems. So even that is possible. Now, if you really cannot decide at all, then I am a little bit biased towards Norwegian because that's the Scandinavian language that I speak myself, but it is also because it's a little bit in the middle between the other two languages. As I said in the joke, the writing between Norwegian and Danish is almost the same. Danish to me looks like Norwegian with typos. Swedish and Norwegian are quite similar in their pronunciation, so you have something in common with all of these languages if you learn Norwegian, but it is definitely also possible to switch, for example, from Swedish to Danish or from Danish to Swedish. That's also perfectly doable. So if you prefer to start with Swedish or with Danish, that's also just fine. So in general, I would say trust your gut feeling. There is not much you can do wrong. There's also not much in terms of what is more difficult or what is easier. Danish might be a little bit more challenging with the pronunciation. Swedish might be a tiny little bit more challenging with the grammar. Norwegian has a few own peculiarities that you might want to be aware of. But in general, these languages are relatively easy because they are also similar to English. They're in the same language family. So whichever of those you choose, you cannot really make a mistake.